Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we delve into the world of streamlining your accounts payable processes using SCANMAN. SCANMAN is the only Oracle validated AP automation solution for JD Edwards. I'm Sasha Blomer, the Marketing Manager for Endeavour, and I'm going to be your host for today. Just to give you a little bit of background, Endeavour started the journey with SCANMAN back in 2020, and since that time we've had a few clients transform their AP automation. Automating your accounts payable process, it's a clear game changer and one of the most obvious examples of an automation project that delivers clear and measurable ROI with advantages that go far beyond simply reducing manual paperwork. So what are we going to show you here today? You're going to see why SCANMAN is the leading AP automation solution for JDE. You're also going to hear about the journey of an Australian customer, Viva Energy, as well as get an overview of how SCANMAN is keeping pace with the continual changes within JDE before seeing a short demonstration. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce my guest today, Pascal Decline. Pascal is the Global Head of Sales for SCANMAN, and once I hand things over to him, he'll be explaining why you should be looking at SCANMAN in particular. He's going to go beyond the facts that it's the only AP automation solution validated by Oracle for JD Edwards, that it's embedded within your JD Edwards, so it looks and feels just like any other part of your JDE system, and it keeps pace with your system as you apply updates and enhancements from Oracle. Pascal's also going to provide us with a customer story and cover what's new in the latest release of SCANMAN, and from there you can bombard him with your questions. So you're probably all familiar with the platform, but just in case, there should be a little panel available to you on the right hand side of your screen. Just pop your questions through there, and rest assured we are recording this and we'll send you a link to the recording in a few days. So without further hold up, it's over to you, Pascal.
All right, Sasha, thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, I will start a little bit on the background of our own company. So we are SCANMAN. We are part of the Forza IT group, and we are 100 also in line with Endeavour. We are also 100% focused on the JD Edwards market. Our company started in 2007 and was actually founded by former JD Edwards EMEA financial specialists. At the moment, we are having a little bit more than 250 plus clients globally with our financial process suite. The financial process suite, we actually started that suite in 2015 with the AP automation solution that we are going to that I'm going to present today. But mind you, we also have other solutions in place in combination with JD Edwards, integrated with JD Edwards, and those are more on the accounts receivable reconciliation, on payment automation, and also we provide additional vendor management portals. But like I said, we are going to focus on the AP automation piece today. The solution went to market in 2016, and rapidly, well, year over year, we have an average of 34% growth, rapidly becoming the #1 AP automation solution, especially when it comes to an embedded solution. That's one of the unique things of the SCANMAN solution itself. We have well, majority of our customers are serviced and supported directly by our own company, but for the Australian and New Zealand market, we have our dedicated partnership with Endeavour. Yeah, this slides give you a little bit of an overview of the it's actually a selection of the customers that we are servicing with the AP automation solution. And as you can see, we have our customer base in all the major JD Edwards markets globally. Also in Australia. Today we'll also be talking about the Viva Energy case. But to give you an example, we also have the customers in Australia like Cabrini, Australia Vintage, RedSource and Packer. Okay, first of all, to start on embeddedness, because I just want to make clear that you guys understand what if we're talking about an embedded solution. So what are the details of an embedded solution? Well, first of all, we are an Oracle validated integration solution, which means that we have the trademark from Oracle, and we are also we have built the solution actually within the Oracle E1. Oracle GD Edwards E1 solution itself. So it's 100% built in the E1 environment without a custom code. So we are using the coding of Oracle, and we are actually, well, we can do that because of the fact that we have the trademark. The other thing is, if you have an embedded solution, and that means that you are that the AP department, but also the people responsible for the whole AP process, are working within the GD Edwards environment. The other thing is that it also has a 100% fit with all the E1 processes and also the modules, especially the ones which are touched by the AP process. Another one is that all the business rules, the data validation, and also the security of GD Edwards also applies to SCANMAN, since it is an embedded solution. Also to mention is the fact that we have part of the solution is also an OCR engine. We are actually leveraging the one from Abbyy. One of the main advantages is the fact that this one is it's a template-free OCR solution, which means that it's not reliable on the templates of the supplier. So it's actually based on keywords and artificial intelligence, which means that for every template of a supplier, it will only look for the specific keywords in the template, and also related to the position of that information that's connected to the keyword. And so, for instance, invoice number, it can be stated everywhere in the template. It will also always be recognized by the system, which means that the recognition rates are also relatively high compared to traditional template-based OCR solutions, where you constantly have to train the OCR solution because you are dealing with different templates. Another one, of course, is the fact that we have direct access to the GD Edwards master data. This is also quite handy, for instance, from a reporting perspective. I will show you later also on the high-over functionality, and one of them is reporting. And because we have access to all the AP, direct access to all the master data, we can also provide some real-time reporting from that perspective. This is the user interface. Of course, we will go through to the demo environment later on, but just to give you an idea of the way. And as you can see, it's completely embedded in GD Edwards. Okay, so overall, I think it's quite important to understand what are the benefits of an embedded solution. Well, first of all, because we have direct access to the master data, we are working in GD Edwards. You are constantly working with a single source of truth. You don't have a standalone AP solution where you constantly have to import, export data, and you're not up to speed with the latest updates of your your master data. No, you're working constantly with the real-time master data. So no data synchronization issues. And the other thing is, every time when GD Edwards will be updated or upgraded, the system will also be automatically updated and upgraded. So also from that perspective, you're constantly up to speed with the latest GD Edwards releases. Of course, you need, but that's something that we are going to provide, but we are constantly updating, upgrading our solution itself in line with GD Edwards, and also with new functionalities. Of course, you still need to update your system yourself, of course, or Endeavour will actually assist you in that. So in a nutshell, then, the whole AP process and the automation of the whole AP process is in one solution, completely embedded in JD AdWords. All right, and to give you a little bit of an idea how this works, we have, well, you see the picture in front of you. This is the way that the supplier invoices are processed within the system. If we go to the left-hand side of the picture, you see the receiver methods that we standardly support. So we see a lot of PDF invoices coming in as an attachment via email, and the system is capable of monitoring, constantly monitoring designated email boxes. So once an invoice will come in, then it will automatically be picked up by the system, and it will go through the OCR engine. That's the one for the optical character recognition, for the necessary recognition of the invoice data. And then, of course, there's the paper. Well, we still see the paper-based invoices arriving, and yeah, paper-based invoices can of course be scanned by a multifunctional, and the output of that can either be exchanged also via those designated email boxes that we monitor, or you can use network or cloud storage that those positions can also be monitored by the system. The scanned invoices, typically images, TIFF, GPG, those kind of formats, will also go through the OCR engine for recognition purposes. Last but not least, of course, we have also seen a lot of movement towards XML. XML and EDI formats are also standardly supported. We have a dynamic XML mapper in the system, which means that practically all XML formats are automatically accepted by the system and will be translated into, and this is a little bit technical, but it will be translated into UBL 2.1, which is an international e-invoicing standard, and that one is also automatically accepted by the system itself. In the middle, you see AIS and /BSSV, and that's the, well, kind of the integration layer between the output on the left-hand side and then the input towards JD AdWords E1, and of course the embedded SCANMAN solution. Depending on your release, we are using AIS server or BSSV for this one. And then within SCANMAN, overall, the invoices will go through certain scenarios, depending if it's a cost invoice, non-PO, or cost invoice, or a PO-based invoice. Non-PO cost invoice, of course, will be validated, then can be automatically coded within the system, and then approval workflows will be automatically kicked off, because we see in a lot of times we see that cost invoices need approvals from the internal organization, and then of course the two and the three-way matching automatically. That one is also a main functionality within SCANMAN. Of course, we're talking about the PO-based invoices. Two-way match, that's of course the invoice against the PO, and the three-way match is also including the receipt. So those are kind of the automatic flows that are supported by the system. Then of course we have some main functionalities from a business continuity perspective, and to give more visibility on the process itself. First of all, it's delegation. You can delegate your role within the system. So for instance, if you're an approver and you're going on holiday, then you can delegate your role for a certain period to another person within the organization. Like I said, reporting is also a functionality. I think at the moment we have 39 reports in place, standardly available. Most of them are on the statuses of the invoices, on the exception handling, because these are the things that the customers would like to focus on, not the heavy flows, because yeah, that's a given thing. For every single invoice, there's also an audit trail in place, so you can actually see the current status of the invoice until the moment of time, who worked on what step or process within the system. And last but not least, you're also capable of manual upload invoices within the system on the fly. That's in a nutshell. That is how the system works. The basic SCANMAN system. Additionally, we also provide a mobile approval app, and the mobile approval app is quite handy if you or people within your organization work very remotely, and also if you have approvers without a GD Edwards license. So if they're not part of GD Edwards, they still need to do approvals, then they can use the mobile app. This one is both Android and iOS supported. And actually the connection, that's a bit technical, but the connection between the mobile app and the GD Edwards E1/SCANMAN environment is done via AIS server. It's technology that's been used. All right. Yeah, let's have a look at Viva Energy. Viva Energy is I think a customer who is using SCANMAN for about 4 years now, 3 to 4 years. Yeah, of course they are quite known for their the fact that they are the owner of Geelong oil refinery, and also the Shell stations across Australia. Yeah, well, you see here an introduction on and also some facts on them, and they are very proud that they supply about a quarter of the fuel Australians need to reach their destination. So yeah, they must be the market leader within Australia when it comes to fuel distribution and providing those things. So what actually happened at Viva Energy in 2018 or 19, they moved from SAP to GD Edwards E1. And at that time, there were some issues when it comes to the AP, the processing of supplier invoices. At that time, it was a semi-manual invoice process itself. It was kind of, it was a combination of some manual interventions and also some automation there. There were no, and that's of course very essential within the organization, is the fact that there were no approval workflows between the business and the AP. So that itself was quite a manual process. The AP department worked with spreadsheets on to get an insight on the statuses of the invoices. So that's also not very convenient, of course, also not very centralized. And at the end, they came to the conclusion that they also don't have a single source of truth. Actually, there was not a single solution that covered all the processing of the invoices. So you had OCR, the images, the non-PO cost invoices, the PO-based invoices. There was not a single solution covering the automation of the automatic processing of all these invoices. And mind you, Viva Energy itself, it does, well, the AP department is handling more than 600 invoices per day. And if this is a long, if the processing time is quite long and it's error prone, then it can be quite a nightmare, I suppose. Or at least it's seriously not a situation where you want to be in. And this is the reason, of course, that Viva Energy was looking for a solution to automate those processes. And the reason why they have chosen SCANMAN are a few of them. First of all, it's the fact that it's one solution. You can cover, like explained also in the presentations a few slides back. We can cover the automatic processing of all supplier invoices. Doesn't matter, independently of the receiving method or the format of the invoice. The other thing is it's an out-of-the-box solution, which is completely embedded within GD Edwards. This was one of the main advantages for Viva Energy, and so no customization needed. And yeah, sometimes we see other solutions in place where there is quite some customization needed. With this one, this is fully covered. The other thing is that it's a real-time solution. Like I said, there's an audit trail on an individual invoice level, but constantly And this is of course because of the fact that they used to work with spreadsheets on the status of invoices. Now they have a real-time solution. They can look at every individual invoice and to see what happened with that invoice by using the audit trails. Last but not least, SCANMAN is part of a broader financial process suite, and therefore it's also, well, from Viva Energy perspective, it's quite future-proof, because with our range of solutions, Viva Energy is also capable of automating other financial processes. And first of all, I want to mention that they are also using the vendor management portal. And this portal is used for the vendor onboarding. It's actually a collaborative platform in which the suppliers of Viva Energy and Viva Energy itself can work on actually the purchase to pay process itself. So it's the receivement of orders from for the suppliers. They can actually approve them. They can flip them into invoices if needed. And there's a lot of documents that can also be exchanged between the supplier and and Viva Energy itself. So this is a solution that they're already using. I think they're also using this for a couple of years now. And Viva Energy is also looking at the AR side, because the SCANMAN Financial Suite is also focusing on, for instance, the automation of sales orders. Remittance advice processing is part of that. And I'm not saying that they're using it, but at least it was a plus to know that these kind of solutions are also provided by SCANMAN itself. Okay, if you look at the achievements of Viva Energy, well, these are quite hard figures, but I think they will speak for itself. So first of all, it's the reduction of the FTE headcount on the AP department from 7 to 4. Important, of course, is the processing time, which used to be more than, I think, what we used to be 5 minutes. Now it's 1 minute. So yeah, that's 80% more effective, I would say. And overall, it's the timeliness and accuracy of the processing of the supplier invoices. And to give you a little bit more proof, here's also a quote of Trish Proporis, the category manager, treasury of Viva Energy Australia, which is actually focusing on the fact that they now have a full end-to-end solution, and the keywords are also real time. Yeah. Real time, end to end. Those are the main things that were that important to go for the SCANMAN solution itself. Okay, if we and yeah, of course, Viva Energy had their own reasons and benefits in place, but if we look from a broader perspective, then we can see also other efficiency gains. So this is based on the research that we did in our customer base 2 years ago. And if you look, and these are also the reasons why customers are going for an AP automation solution in general. So first of all, it's the cost savings, of course, and like Viva Energy went from 7 to 4 headcount, the headcount. So but it's also the fact that the personnel who used to work on manual entry can now work only on exceptions. So that means that AP persons can also be how do you call this, exploit in a more efficient way and do all the more more interesting work, I would say, but they could be more beneficial to the company, doing more valuable things than just manual entry. Of course, rework reduced also the research time especially on the invoices that needed exception handling. Of course, if you have a solution in place, it's much easier to work on that. compared to if it would be a semi or a manual process itself. In the end, also lower total cost of ownership. If you compare it to, and this is typically something for an embedded solution like SCANMAN, because you're constantly in sync with GD Edwards and you don't have to invest in separate solution or integration layers and those kind of things. So at the end, the total cost of ownership also, when it comes from a training perspective, you can imagine if you have an AP department or approvers, etc., who are already working in GD Edwards, it's way easier to work with SCANMAN compared to a standalone solution where you from scratch on have to learn how this system works and how it interrelates with GD Edwards. So at the end, those training costs are also lower. So yeah, at the end, total cost of ownership is seriously lower than a standalone solution. Of course, cycle time reductions in our customer base, on average, we saw 14 days, and now you're talking about seconds, minutes, and if it's exceptions, well, maybe a few days. So completely all the ball game, of course, having such a solution in place. More visibility and control, like I said, all the trails, dashboarding, reporting. There's a lot of alerting also in the solution. Escalations can be automated. So yeah, there's more visibility and you're more in control of the process and also more in control of the exception handling process itself. And last but not least, by using such a solution, you can also improve the relationships with your vendors. They're more confident on the outcome. It's also because of the fact that you are capable of processing the invoices in a very timely manner. It means that you avoid late payments and also the potential penalties which can be involved in those. The SCANMAN solution is constantly improved. We having a roadmap scheme which involves at least one major upgrade per year. Sometimes we also add a minor upgrade, which is more on bug fixing or small functionalities which are added. So if you go back to last year, yeah, we were also focusing on getting more languages on board. So the user interface is now also in French and Spanish, which is quite handy for North and South America and also the French-speaking countries. And the last release was actually last quarter. And what we did there is that we focused on, first of all, the two-way matching, which out of the box is not part of JD Edwards, but we have seen a lot of, we actually have seen a lot of need for that in the market. So we added the two-way matching to make the two-way voucher match to the system. Like already explained, also the dynamic XML mapping. So we are capable of translating all kinds of XML formats to UBL 2.1. The REST-driven integration based on AIS as an alternative for BSSV server. So those are things that we added in the last release. And if you're looking, and you can also see it here in this overview, in the next release is planned for Q4, and another one we have for Q3 next year. And those will also be focusing on first of all, the extension of the XML functionality. So for instance, the PEPPOL access point that we are going to create, that means that PEPPOL is also an e-invoice extended, which is promoted by the Australian and New Zealand governments. And PEPPOL is actually a network for exchanging e-invoices based on UBL 2.1, I think. So if we are an access point, it's way easier to connect to suppliers who are also on the PEPPOL network. And outside of Australia, we see a lot of PEPPOL well, mostly in Europe, I would say. And then of course there's also other features that we are going to add Some of them will be on the dashboarding and reporting side. And yeah, of course, there will be improvements in improvements on the audit trail, the approvals, and also we are going to add all the languages from a user interface perspective. So user interface languages. We will add Dutch and good German. Not sure if this is very if this is very convenient, or how do you call this, beneficial for the Australian market, but at least you know that we have it. And then in 2014, we are going to focus on mostly on the mobile side. So the mobile app, which will also include new functionality and will also be migrated to a more stable development platform. All right. Then I would like to switch to the demo environment to give you, to show you a few scenarios, and also to give you a little bit of an idea how, how the system works in general. Let me see if I can. All right. Okay. I will log in as an AP admin. As you can see, it's the same login screen as GD Edwards because, like I said, we are an embedded solution, so it's in the GD Edwards environment. All right. If I log in, I have logged in as an AP admin, which means that there's no boundaries. I can see all the information, security, also from a security perspective. Okay, and then we'll end up at the E1 page. And what we actually did here is we reproduced the process itself, and we created some quick links. So in this overview, you see here on the left-hand side, you see the receiving methods that I also presented in the PowerPoint. And then all the invoices will end up in the SCANMAN workbench. This is the central repository of the system. And so all the invoices that came in via email, as a scan, or via direct XML exchange, they will all end up in the SCANMAN workbench. And then from the central SCANMAN workbench, and also the ones who actually were processed unsuccessfully. So if there would be an error, even from the receiving side, they will end up with in the workbench with an error message. So all the exception handling is always done from the workbench itself in the system. And then, of course, depending on the invoice, the type of invoice, we have the 3-way and 2-way matching in place, which will end up at the supplier ledger inquiry. It's also the voucher distribution, the voucher approval. So these are all steps within the process. And if you push the button, then you'll end up at that particular step within the process, and you will see the overviews of, for instance, the approved invoices. We have a setup section here. This is typically for the admin user. So if you click on that, you can see an overview of all kinds of functionality that can be managed within SCANMAN. The super user of the customer, the admin user, is always trained in this, and for instance, he or she can work on setting up the approvers, the routing, and of course change it. Of course, during the implementation, Endeavour will of course set up the default approvals and hierarchies, etc., escalations for the customer itself. But the customer is also capable of changing and managing this within this setup overview. So here, for instance, it's all about the approvals, the hierarchies, the escalations, the alerting, etc. Here it's about OCR overrides, and I'm not going to touch all of them, but here, for instance, you have the query application. So there are a lot of things that the customer itself can also manage within the system without consulting the business partner. Like I said, we also have delegation. So if you push this one, you can delegate a certain role to other persons. So for instance, if I push David Smith, and David Smith, yeah, for instance, he can delegate his role to, and this is all to be set up here in the system. Just an example, we already configured this up front. So in this case, David Smith is part of the DNV approval route, and it can actually delegate its role to a certain person for an effective date till an expiration date. And once the expiration date passes, then of course the approval routing will go back to the originator. Of course, query application to set up all kinds of queries yourself, but like I said, we already have 39 standard reports in place in the system. Also, when it comes to the tolerance settings, you can set up rounding tolerances in the system, but also standard tolerances. So for instance, if you say, okay, from this particular supplier, we accept 5% tolerance. So if it's 5% higher or lower than what we expect, then it will still be automatically processed. Well, as an example, you can set it up here in the system. Let's go directly to the SCANMAN workbench. So like I said, all invoices will end up in this overview. And since I'm AP admin, I'm seeing all invoices. But you can imagine if you're an AP person, it will be more split up because you are responsible, for instance, for a certain group of suppliers, or you're responsible for certain administrations within the company. Then you will see only those invoices, and you can also search on the statuses. So, for instance, because a lot of AP persons are not very interested at the end in all the invoices that are successfully processed within the system, but the ones that need the attentions. So if you look here, we have all kinds of, and this is of course the demo environment. So there's a lot of statuses that can be added depending on the statuses that the customer would like to work with. But yeah, for instance, you can search here on the errors. So you will only see the errors within the system, or the ones that had a fails or a mismatch. So this is two-way or three-way match. If they failed, then status F. That gives you also an overview of the ones who are rejected. Yeah, so yeah, you can actually down drill here and only see the ones that you would like to work on. All right. So this is, like I said, these are all the invoices that are, and with the status within the system itself. And here on the, let me see. Oh, here you see also an error message, but we actually ignored this one. I will explain on this. It says duplicate. So actually, this is a warning that this invoice is already in the system or has already been processed within the system. The reason for that is the fact that I use this same example many times in the system. But for the demo purposes, we will ignore this one. So we'll overrule this within this demo scenario. But at least it shows you that the system is already validating on this thing, on duplicates. So I'll pick this one, and then you can see that I explain what actually happened with this invoice. This is a cost invoice, and it was sent to a designated email box. It went through the OCR engine in the background, the Abbyy one, and then it came in the system here, and it was also automatically validated against master data of JD Edwards. It was also automatically coded, because this is also a functionality within the system. Invoices can be manually coded in the system, or can be automatically coded based on, for instance, the fact that you always code for certain suppliers, groups, or for certain cost center, you always code to the same general ledger account number, for instance, or that you used the GL account which has been used the previous time for the same supplier. That's also a possibility to be set up in the system. But for this, in this scenario, it was also automatically coded, and also a voucher has been created. But first of all, I would like to explain a bit on the data recognition and the OCR piece. So if you scroll down here, you will see all the invoice data that we fetched for this invoice. So we're talking about this invoice. If you see here, you see the invoice header fields and the import value overview and the process value. The import value is the information fetched by the OCR. If you see here on the right hand side, you see a picture of the invoice, and you can also zoom in, and if it's multiple pages, they will also be visible here. And you see all kinds of red rectangles. The red rectangles represent the information fetched by the OCR, and that information is visible here in the import value overview. So for instance, company has been recognized by the address. Of course, it can be different. It can be the name of the company itself. It could be the address, could be the contact person. There's a multiple ways of recognition of the G. Edwards company. So in this case, based on the address, we could find 260 as being the SCANMAN demo company. It's a process value. The process value is the validated GD Edwards value within the system. So based on the address, we could find the company. Based on the in this case the tax ID of the supplier, but we could also use the COC number, the VOT, or even the address of the supplier. We could recognize, and this is also validated against the master data in the address book. We could find the pizza company Soes as being the supplier here. Same goes for invoice number, invoice date. This is the European way, and so the import value of the OCR is the European way of displaying an invoice date. But since we're talking in this example, we're talking about the US company, so it's automatically enriched, and here you can see the display of the invoice date in it as being the US standard for displaying such a date. We can work with multiple currencies, same as JD Edwards. In this case, it was only USD, but otherwise there would be also an exchange rate visible here. Also related header fields. So based on the recognition of, for instance, supplier, we already know that the payment term is 30 days. We recognize the GL date, the service tax date, and this is something that we typically, this is set up in the system. So based on the recognition, we could also already see that the approval workflow will be kicked off, and that Joost Engel is the approver in this case. Invoice amounts, of course, based on the recognition of this, and here in the invoice image. So the totals, VATs. We can work with multiple VATs. You see here 5 lines, but actually there's no boundaries here. No line item recognition because this is a cost invoice, so it's a header level field only. All right. So yeah, so recognition of all the data successfully matched against the master data JD Edwards. If there is a discrepancy, then this invoice would go into an error status or fail status, and then you could actually see, and then you will see, for instance, here that this is red, and then somebody can actually execute on this and change data, or actually work on the exception here. But this one is a successful, this one is successfully validated and matched against the data of JD Edwards. So it went through the next stage, which is automatically coding, and then a voucher has been created. Completely automated process. The only thing is that if you look at the voucher, and I can also show you here the GL redistribution, real GL distribution, you see that this is receive voucher on account number, the amount, etc. So all the information here is already processed within the system. The only thing is that this voucher is not eligible for payment. It's on hold because, like I said, there is also an approval route code connected to this, and there's a two-step approval routing in place. This one is visible here. It makes use of the approval route code demo P. Two-step. It's Leo and it's Pascal, myself. It works with amount thresholds. So 1 to 50 is for Leo, and 15 above is myself. What I can do is I can show you now how this works with the approvals. So if I sign out here, and then I go to my email. So what actually happened? Leo Pyman is the one that needs to do the first approval step, needs to execute on that step, and yeah, he received an email which was forwarded to myself. And yeah, well, this is a very simple email. You can set it up in your own house style. You can even work with direct links to the approvals and the rejections, but then you need to attach also the PDF invoice mostly. But in a lot of cases, customers don't want to work like that. They just want to have a notification, also a link to JD Edwards. So if a link here, put on the link, and then Leo will log in with his own credentials, and then he will end up at the voucher approval of this particular invoice. So he will see some details on the GL distribution. He can also have a look at the original invoice. He can add attachments if needed. That's a possibility. And then, of course, three possibilities to act on this invoice. First of all, approve, yeah, or reject. Most of the time, it will go back to the AP department. And last but not least, also if explanation is needed or other persons need to be involved for this invoice, then he can ask a question to anybody in the organization. So he can search for the person and then enter the question. Then this other person will also be involved in the workflow, and everybody who's part of the workflow will be informed on the fact that this is also part of the extended workflow now. Okay, let's say this is okay. I can approve this. I can approve with an approval reason. It's not mandatory, but it's part of the demo scenario we're following here. This is okay, Pascal, because I know Leo knows that Pascal is the next one in line to do its approval. All right. Application closed because of the fact that Leo had only one invoice to approve. Otherwise, he will go to the next and the next and the next, or he can work from a list. All right. Then I will go to the second step of the approval, and for this one, I will use the mobile app. So I made a connection with my own phone now. I will search for the SCANMAN app. Sorry. Yeah, with this one I can use my witness credentials, or you can use two-factor authentication methodologies, or JD Edwards user IDs. But yeah, typically it's also used by non-JD Edwards users. So in a lot of cases you are working with the other two methods. Okay, yeah, I will go to the newest one, and then this is the one we're talking about. So imagine you're the approver, you don't have any access to JD Edwards, then of course you would like to know a lot of information on this invoice before you're going to approve or reject this one. So here you see a lot of invoice details, supplier, also the GL distribution, the journal entry is visible here, the approval trails, comments. Also, there's all functionality that's also available in SCANMAN itself in JD Edwards. It's also here. Okay. I'll also approve this one with reason. Approve. Okay, has been approved. It's out of my list. It's now in the approved list. And I can also look at the rejected ones in the past. So there's a lot of functionality, and all this functionality is also part of SCANMAN itself. All right. Now I would like to go back to SCANMAN, because we can have a look at the. Let's go back now to the. Yeah, here it is. And now I have a look at the. I will have a look at the voucher, and you will see that it's eligible for payment, approved for payment, based on the fact that we did we executed or the approvals has been executed. Okay, this was a cost invoice. I can also show you very quickly on a PO based one. So for instance, this one is still in status verify, and we actually stopped it in the system just to show you on possibilities here. This is a PO based invoice. Actually, it's a two-way one, so we can compare the invoice with the PO. Also line item recognition. You see here all the red rectangles here in the lines. Import process value, those validations are identical to the cost invoice we just saw, but now we also recognize the PO number, and it's also validated. So it's been recognized, it's been verified within the GD Edwards system. It was also found, and let me show you more on the details here. If we go to the OCR lines, you see all the individual lines that we recognized, but also here the PO lines are visible. So one-to-one, if I one-to-one, the OCR lines and the PO lines will be matched against one another. And if you're talking about two- and three-way matching, we can actually match not only one PO with one invoice, but also on line items, certain invoice lines with certain POs. So it can be one to many and many to one, if it makes sense. So one invoice to one PO, multiple invoices to one PO, certain lines of certain lines within an invoice against certain POs. So it's very, all these scenarios are standardly supported by the system. I'm not sure if we have some time left. The only thing that I can also show you is on the exception handling. Sorry, I made a mistake here because I was a little bit too fast. So no, this is not good. Let's go back. Excuse me. This is okay. Let's focus on the mismatch. So the AP person will see that this invoice has a mismatch. VMA match failed. Of course, the file name will not be quantity differences, but this is one that we created for the demo purposes. So for every single invoice, it can go through all kinds of statuses and information related to this invoice. And we also have a VMA analysis. And in this case, you can work also on this exceptions on line item level. So you see all the lines here, EDI line number. And if you scroll to the right, you will see that there is a mismatch. You can actually also drill down only on the mismatches on line item level. So in this case, amount mismatch, because there's a difference between the receipt line and the invoice line, way out of tolerances. I think the tolerances that has been set for this one is 5%. Well, 37.5 is way higher, of course. And then you can actually act on this, because you can have a look at the receipt and fix it there, because there was a difference with the receipt. But you can also start a Q&A, for instance, and that Q&A can be within your organization, for instance, with the warehouse within your organization. But also you can start the communication with your supplier. It's your supplier, because it could be that the supplier also made a mistake here. And then at the end you can fix this, and then actually start the matching. At the end you can start the matching again, and then I assume that at the end it will match successfully then. I think that's about it from a demo perspective. So I think it would be good to give back the floor to Sasha.
Thanks, Pascal. I've got a couple of questions. Now that we're at the end of the demo, if you've got any questions, please shoot them through on the panel to the right-hand side. But in the meantime, Pascal, I'm just going to run through some of the questions I have had. So one of them is, we are already receiving invoice data via EDI. Can this be incorporated into the SCANMAN process so that we have a single workflow?
Yes, that is possible. Like I explained, the structured formats, we are mentioning also XML, but we are also including the EDI ones because those are also structured format. Yeah, the only thing is that we need to have a look how we are going to translate that to the UBL 2.1. But if all the necessary invoice details are in that in those EDI formats, then those can be included in the solution, and you can create your one-stop invoice supplier invoice system.
Okay. And what options do you provide for the archiving of data?
Okay, yeah, that's one of the things that I forgot to mention, but because we are a little bit out of time. There's actually 3 ways in which, or what we see in our customer base is that I think majority of them are using network or cloud storage. Well, first of all, we store the invoices once, and we can. Most of our customers use either network location to store the invoices, or cloud storage positions. We can integrate, or well, it's something that Endeavor will set up, but it can integrate with a DMS, document management system, like for instance SharePoint. The other one is, but I don't see that a lot, is archiving it in JD Edwards itself, but that can be quite costly unless you're not doing a lot of invoices. But so I think those are the options.
Do you have a PO approval app, or is it invoice only?
If you're talking about the app that you just saw, that's only on invoices. We have a solution for PO approvals, but this one is externalized outside of the embedded SCANMAN environment.
Okay.
So the other, because of the fact that we are providing additional solutions based on a cloud platform. Today I haven't mentioned that today, but and one of the solutions there is purchasing, and within that, and we have a PO approval solution. So, but yes, like I said, it is outside of this mobile app.
Okay. Currently, our AP team members each have their own dedicated list of suppliers that they look after. Mm-hmm. Can you support this? And is this the way that most AP teams work with the SCANMAN product?
Yeah, this is what we also typically see in our customer base, that they split up the workbench between different persons based on certain criteria. Can be like I said, I think I already explained this. It could be based on administrations, could be on supplier groups, for instance. But yes, you can split it up. Yeah, so that individual persons are only working on the ones who are within their responsibility. Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to automated voucher matching, what tolerances are involved and how is this handled?
Sorry, I didn't got the question. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, sure. When it comes to automated voucher matching, what tolerances are involved and how is this handled?
Yeah, that's depending on how the customer would like to work with tolerances. It could be, well, first of all, rounding tolerances. That's maybe an easy one. The other one, we can work with a percentage or a total or a maximum amount as a tolerance. But it's more on the policy that the customer would like to follow when it comes to these kind of tolerances. We have even customers who accept 0 tolerances, for instance.
Okay.
So in this case, we are very flexible.
All right, and that's actually all the questions that we've had.
All right.
So now, if anyone does want to get started or they'd like a tailored demo or need more information, please don't hesitate to get in touch with either Andrew or Tom or myself. It's andrew.janke@endeavour.com.au or tom.devine@endeavour.com.au. And we'll send out a link to the recording of this session in a few days. Thank you very much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your week.
All right, thank you very much.